Hello, hello, hello.
One, two. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ignore me, it's fine. 1, 2, 1, 2. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm doing the sound check for KTV. It's fine for us, trying to make sure it's fine for our friends.
Well, she said to me no more than 5 minutes, and she's not very long in the scheme of things. Oh, that'll be more time for discussion, which is fine. I don't even know. She didn't tell me who the other people were. Nina's the one you say 5 minutes, Joe, and she does 15. Well, I've got a good 5 minutes.
massive voice.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming this evening and joining us in the celebration of International Women's Day. Today, we've gathered here to celebrate women's achievements in the political field. I'm proud to announce that we have our 3 cabinet members. Well, the third one's running a little late, so she'll be here. And MP, Emma Reynolds, she should be here soon. And they're all females, and we're really proud to have so many female leaders in Wolverhampton. Our other topic of discussion is how religion plays a part in empowering a woman. If every religion claims to provide equal rights to women, then where are we lacking in order to implement those teachings and guidance? Why there is still suffering? Why an 11-year-old child get raped? A girl get acid thrown on her face just because she refused to accept a marriage proposal from a man she never liked. A girl get forced into a marriage with a man who's 3 times older than her. Well, we're hoping to have some answers from our wonderful speakers today. But first of all, let me introduce you to the host of the evening, Miss Manjit Kaur Chadha. Manjit Kaur lives in Wolverhampton, and she's an accounts manager in local manufacturing firm by profession and has a passion for serving the community in her free time. Manjit joined Jakara Limited in 2018 as a volunteer, and now she's a project coordinator and a treasurer for Jakara. She actively campaigns against domestic violence and attends courses to gain knowledge and understanding on how domestic abuse and violence affects different individuals. Now, I would like to call on stage Manjit Chadha, and she'll be the host for the evening. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and the young ones we have with us today. I'm your host this afternoon, and we're gathered here to commemorate International Women's Day to acknowledge the social, cultural, economic, and political achievements of women. International Women's Day is celebrated on the 8th of March every year and also marks a call to action for accelerating gender equality. We will start the program with a short tribute to Princess Sophia Duleep Singh, one of the main leaders of suffragette. Our panel of guest speakers will contribute in highlighting women's achievements in political field, as well as exploring how religion plays a part in promoting equality amongst men and women. We hope you will enjoy this event and appreciate the depth of knowledge and understanding that our speakers will be sharing with us today. My colleague, Councillor Rupinderjit Kaur, will be joining me for a short presentation. Mrs. Rupinderjit Kaur was elected Labour Councillor for Springvale Ward, Wolverhampton City Council constituency in May 2015. Since then, Rupinder has worked tirelessly in her ward, both at development and strategic levels. Mrs. Kaur is also running her own organization called Jaikara Limited, a leading social enterprise that seeks to readdress imbalances around equality and quality of opportunities at grassroots level. Mrs. Kaur is a visionary leader. She believes in being proactive in solving difficult issues rather than forever complaining. Her motto is, just do it. Mrs. Kaur's roots are in Punjab and she adores poetry as well as other quality literature. She hosts book launches and Kavi Darbars or poetry readings to instill love for arts and to help create an appreciation amongst those especially less likely to partake in such events. Her remit also involves helping young people to access employment through training program and promoting the heritage history, helping those affected by issues such as domestic violence, poverty, caste, and gender bias in popular music and other concerns affecting development and progress of communities. Rupinder is a visionary leader and also a change agent. She seeks to bring about positive change by working with all communities. She believes that people can be part of the solution and everyone can play a role in helping to create a better society. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Councillor Rupinderjit Kaur.
Thank you, Seema. Should we start the presentation?
Yeah.
We are doing a small tribute to Princess Sophia Duleep Singh, and you'll probably have heard her name before, but you'll know more about her, who she was. Sophia Duleep Singh was born in 1876, and she was the granddaughter of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. She fought for people's right, becoming part of the Women's Tax Resistance League, leading the suffragette movement. She became a thorn in the side of the establishment, courting arrest and being fined. Next slide, please.
Maharaja Ranjit Singh carved out the Sikh Empire in modern-day India and Pakistan. The British East India Company and its policies led to highly contested Anglo-Sikh wars of 1845 to 1849.
Sophia's grandmother, Maharani Jinda Kaur, and her father, Duleep Singh, became the heirs of Sikh Empire, but this was short-lived with annexation of the Punjab in 1849 by East India Company.
Next. Maharaja Duleep Singh married Princess Bamba and had 6 children. Sophia was the youngest daughter and she grew up in Suffolk. Queen Victoria was Sophia's godmother who gave her Faraday House to live in, but Sophia wanted more in life and visited India in 1903 and 1907. These visits had an impact on her life, witnessing the issues of poverty, racism, and a surrender of the kingdom to the British.
She returned to London, joining the Women's Social and Political Union. She became a leading activist, fighting for the right to vote with other suffragettes. She joined the Women's Tax Resistance League and refused to pay her taxes. The motto was, no vote, no tax. Sophia spoiled her census paper and defied court judgments awarded against her.
Black Friday is known to be led by Emmeline Pankhurst, but Sophia Duleep was also marching next to her. She led a group of 400 women to Parliament in November 1910, which resulted in heavy-handed response from police, assaulting and injuring around 150 protesters.
Sophia would sell the newspaper Suffragette outside her house, as well as delivering the paper by horse and cart. This drew a new audience to the princess.
This letter to Lord Crewe was a direct response to a photograph that appeared in the Suffragette. Sir William Conington asked if anything could be done to stop her. There is a suggestion that Sophia's campaign could give King George V a reason to evict her from her home. However, this didn't happen and she continued to campaign for suffrage.
Next slide, please. On many occasions, her possessions were impounded and auctioned. These incidents attracted a lot of publicity. The Daily Mail reported her trial in December 1913, where Sophia stated in court, "When the women of England are enfranchised and the state acknowledges me as a citizen, I shall, of course, pay my share willingly to its upkeep."
Suffragette movement was interrupted by the onset of the First World War in 1914. Sophia showed her support helping the Indian wounded soldiers during the war. The wounded Sikh soldiers were fascinated to see the daughter of the last Maharaja of Punjab tending to them.
There were many Indian women who were part of Commonwealth movement demanding the right to vote. This was in 1911 at Women's Coronation Procession.
In 1918, the enactment of the Representation of the People Act allowed women over the age of 30 to vote. In 1928, royal consent was won for the Representation of the People Equal Franchise Act, allowing women over the age of 21 to vote.
Sophia became the president of Committee of Suffragette Fellowship in 1928. She died aged 72 in 1948 and was cremated on 26th of August. This is Sophia at one of the dinner party somewhere.
Yeah, that's right.
Commemoration dinner. Can we have a next slide, please?
That is the end of it. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the end of our presentation and a tribute to Sophia Dalip Singh, a woman who fought for women's rights, and she was, as you said, the granddaughter, the daughter of the last Sikh king, Maharaja Dalip Singh. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much for your patience, and we hope you enjoyed the presentation. Now I will start introducing our guest speakers who are allocated 5 minutes each to deliver their speech. Our first speaker is Councillor Louise Miles, Cabinet Member for Resources. She has been a Labour councillor for decades, and she also teaches law in Wolverhampton University. Please welcome Louise Miles.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me here today to speak on International Women's Day. Not just about the achievements of women, but just about how absolutely fantastic it is to be a woman. I too can't really let the day go past without speaking about the suffragettes. Women who gave their lives so we could vote. The suffragette movement, as has been said, and of course including Sophia Dalip Singh, they suffered and endured many, many challenges in order to bring us the ability to vote. They were beaten, they were arrested, when they were in prison and they went on a hunger strike, they were force-fed. And so, literally, women gave their lives to give us the right to vote. I work in a law school at the university, as has been said, and for about the last month, there's been a whole stream of posters along the main corridor in the law school, which are posters of the first women to achieve various things in law. So the first woman to be a law student, the first woman to be a magistrate, the first woman to be a judge. And of course now we have in law this tremendous achievement that Baroness Hale, who is the President of the Supreme Court, the most senior judge in the land, is a woman. And so a tremendous achievement there for all women. But I think it's really important to remember that behind these women who are, the first doctor or the first lawyer or whatever it is all the women who stood before them and behind them. So if you like, the women who weren't quite the first solicitor, but all the women who kind of pushed forward in the knowledge that even if they didn't achieve what they were trying to achieve, that they would make it easier for other women who were coming behind them. And so that's why I think it's fantastic to see here today so many young women who we can, if you like, hand the torch onto. There have been many, many films and documentaries, as you know, about the suffragette movement. But one of the most recent films stars Meryl Streep as Emmeline Pankhurst and Carey Mulligan as one of the major kind of young suffragettes in the movement. And the end of that film was deliberately ambiguous because in the end of that film, the suffragettes are gathering in a hall to begin a march and demonstration along the streets. And so the lead character, played by Carey Mulligan, goes, steps back to let a woman go ahead of her and goes, carry on. And the filmmakers said that that wasn't just designed to be a kind of point in the plot, but that was the message which they wanted to give to all women, particularly young women, about carry on. Pick up the torch, pick up the flag, and march forward to achieve further things for women. I should say, actually, that, of course, until very recently, I forgot to say earlier, until about 1830, legally, women were chattels. So at law, women didn't have not just the right to vote, but the right to do anything. They couldn't hold property. They were just literally classified as the property of their husbands or fathers. And that didn't start to be changed really until the 1830s. But back to sort of handing on the torch and carrying the flag forward for others, women have achieved a tremendous amount, but there is still, as we know, a tremendous amount to achieve. So if we just take the Equal Pay Act passed in 1970, so nearly 50 years after the Equal Pay Act, I think we, on average, just have about 15%. There's still about a 15% pay gap between men and women. And then, as we all know, the glass ceiling still exists, where women get to a certain point in their particular career choices, and it's very difficult to go further than that. But if we talk about equalities and if we talk about moving forward, I'd just like to perhaps leave you with these thoughts. What is equality about? When we say equality, what do we mean? And I think that equality for all of us as women and also as men is about the ability to choose. Choosing to be who you are, choosing to be what you can achieve. And so we hear a lot, don't we, about the kind of political achievements of women and the legal achievements of women. But I think, of course, that one of the greatest achievements of women is also to be wives and mothers. My own mother says that being a mother is one of the hardest jobs in the world and the one for which you get the least training. And so I think that embracing women and the roles of women in society, let's not forget that. It's about choice, it's about having a voice, and it's about who women strive to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Councillor Lynn Moran, Councillor in St. Peter Ward and Cabinet Member for Resources. Lynn Moran retired last Easter after almost 25 years in probation service. Prior to that, Lynn worked in a variety of children and family projects, a community relations council, and in a night shelter. Election to Wolverhampton City Council occurred in 2015, triggered by the need to promote more women in the council. In 2018, Lynn took up the post of Cabinet Member for Education and Skills and is recently involved in the campaign to preserve our local authority-maintained nursery schools. This period in local government is not Lynn's first experience. While her own 3 sons were young in Oxford, she was elected to Oxfordshire County Council in 1981 in opposition, then to Oxford City Council in 1985, where control was held by the Labour group. In retirement, Lynn has a particular interest in promoting lifelong learning opportunities and prospects for retraining for women. Please welcome Lynn Moran.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm reminded by Louise that the ability to choose is a great strength, and I'm reflecting on what were the things about my life that helped me choose, and it was undoubtedly education and learning and the ability to train. So I want to talk to you about, as you might expect, as a Cabinet Member for Education and Skills, the way in which Wolverhampton tries to assist, particularly girls and young women, to be the best that they can be. So what do we need to be the best we can be? We need to compete on a level playing field with the rest, don't we? We need to feel secure, safe, and supported at home. We need to have parents or carers who aspire on our behalf. We need to attend a school that places children at the centre of their learning, albeit alongside attainment targets. We need to have enough money in the household for food and for heating. 4.1 million, or 30% of children, live in poverty nationally. That's 9 children in every inner city class. All of the above applies to boys and girls, of course, and it's the case that while the UK is the 5th largest economy, we are 15th in the world for gender equality. On International Women's Day, I want to focus on success and opportunity for girls and young women in Wolverhampton. The good news is that we improve steadily. At early years foundation stage, that's when we're rising 5, 76% of girls achieve what's described as a good level of development. That's 2% less than the national average. Now this leaves 24% who may fall behind their peers, and I think that's too many. And that may be by as much as 18 months. So when you're 4, you're starting 18 months behind. Often in language and social skills. They even got a name for it, they call it the word gap. Can you imagine having a word gap when you're 3? Doesn't seem quite fair. At Key Stage 1 then, girls approach 80% success in reading, writing and maths. So 20% of our girls are struggling right now in secondary school. At GCSE, or Key Stage 4, that shows 43% attaining grade 5 in English and maths. And everybody needs English and maths, actually, to get on, one way or the other, functional English and maths. But 57% of young women and girls don't achieve that level, and that's a worry for us all. 70% of female students achieved at least 2 A-levels. So once people have decided that they're going to focus in the 6th form on academic study, they do quite well. We know that 81% of all our schools are good or outstanding. For me, that leaves 19% of schools in need of getting better. So what about the work of our work in terms of skills building and offering opportunities for employment? Because an academic career is not suitable for everybody by any means. Over half of our current apprenticeships are women, and they're studying business, leadership and management, catering, legal studies, education support and more. Apprenticeship opportunities are equally accessible to women already in work, offering upskilling and retraining. These are opportunities for more mature students. The Learning Communities Initiative is a partnership approach of which I feel really very proud. It's designed to support women's return to learning, to skills development and to employment. For example, working to empower women and to build confidence, promoting resilience to tackle radicalisation in the family, that very often will fall upon women, developing English language in a safe space, active citizenship, how important is that? Learning about democracy and the right to vote. 103 women in the past 12 months have been supported into employment through this initiative, and we need more of that. There's plenty more to do, both locally and nationally. 58% of students in medicine and dentistry are women. That's more than half. But oddly enough, only 11.6% of women are consultant surgeons. What's happening along the way? 32% of MPs are women. We're not done yet there, are we? And less than a quarter of senior bankers are women. In Wolverhampton, only 15% of permanent school exclusions are girls. And I mention that because it's very much in the news at the moment. But just 15%, a small minority, are girls. But when we look at registrations at COOF, for those of you who don't know, that's an online mental health support for young women and girls. 70% of the registrations are from girls. Now that begins to tell a story for me about how trauma presents in young people. Sisters and indeed brothers, poverty must be eradicated if we are to be able to choose properly. Social housing must be extended. Our schools must be 100% good or outstanding, so that every student moves on to the training, the higher education or the employment that they choose for themselves. Our community youth services must be reinstated to reflect what young people tell us that they need. So women have come a long way since 1918, when we weren't permitted to graduate and we were only just permitted to vote. And we're not done yet. The direction is upwards, and we shall persist in the fight for equal access, for equal treatment, and for justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. I'd like to inform our guests that KTV are present recording the program right now, and it's live on Facebook. If every one of you can actually share that with the rest of your friends that you have on your Facebook, and it is actually live worldwide right now. And they're also going to be broadcasting it at 7 o'clock tonight on channel 770. Right, our next speaker is Emma Reynolds. She's an MP for Wolverhampton North East. Emma was elected as the Member of Parliament for Wolverhampton North East in May 2010. She has been a member of the House of Commons Brexit Select Committee since it was established in October 2016, having previously spent a year as a member of the House of Commons Health Select Committee. From May until September 2015, she was Shadow Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government. Emma attended local schools before graduating at Oxford University in philosophy, politics, and economics. Prior to becoming an MP, Emma helped to set up a small business which supported British companies in understanding and influencing EU laws. She then went on to work for the Party of European Socialists in Brussels as an advisor to Robin Cook. Emma was later appointed as political advisor to Jeff Hoon in his role as Europe Minister and then Chief Whip. Please welcome Emma Reynolds.
Good afternoon and happy International Women's Day to all of you, women and men in the room. Only by working together, I feel that we can actually achieve gender equality in our country. And as Lynn just said, there's still a lot of work to do. We're not done yet. I wanted to talk, as you might imagine, a little bit about Parliament. And our Parliament is still not a 50-50 Parliament. There are some parliaments in the world that have 50% women: Rwanda, Sweden, Cuba, Mexico, but not our Parliament. It's incredible to think that last year we celebrated the centenary of some women's right to vote. Just to qualify that, you had to be 30 or older, and you had to own property. So it wasn't a universal suffrage, but the suffragettes, we owe them a debt of gratitude for the sacrifices they made. And I was really interested to hear and learn more about Sophia Dulbit Singh, if I said that correctly. The women pioneers who went before us, we owe them a debt of gratitude, because without them, we wouldn't have even made those advances. But given that the first woman MP took her seat, because the first woman MP who was elected was actually a Sinn Féin MP who, still with the same convention, doesn't want to swear allegiance to the Queen, so didn't take her seat, and I think was apparently in jail at the time that she got elected. But the first woman MP to take her seat was a woman called Nancy Astor, and she was supposed to be keeping the seat warm for her husband, who had been put in the Lords because of his status in society, and he wanted to go back to his parliamentary seat. But she became such a parliamentary force that she served for many years as a member of Parliament. And just imagine what it would have been like being the only woman MP in Parliament. I just can't imagine that. And there's a story in a new excellent book written by my colleague Rachel Reeves, who has written The Women of Westminster. And I was reading the first chapter last night, and so intimidating it was for Nancy Astor that when she was sat in the chamber, she didn't want to leave before the end of the debate, because she knew she would be heckled as she tried to get along the benches to make her way out of the chamber. And so in some ways I count myself as lucky. We're standing on these women's shoulders. I'm not heckled when I want to leave the chamber of the House of Commons. Another funny anecdote is that when Harriet Harman was elected in the 1980s, there were only 23 women in Parliament. And my other colleague, Joan Ruddock, who was elected in 1987, said to me, the most striking thing about being a woman parliamentarian is that when you wanted to go to the ladies' toilet, you had to walk for about a mile before you found any facilities from the chamber. And that just goes to show that even, 60, 70 years after the first women were elected, Parliament was still an institution that was supposed to be, really, in most people's eyes, for men, run by men. There weren't even ladies' toilets in the vicinity of the parliamentary chamber. Now that is changing, and in some ways I feel lucky to be a woman now, but obviously there is still sexism in our country. We still don't have enough women MPs. We have around a third, so for every one of me, there are 2 male MPs. I think, and I want to be cross-party about this, our party, the Labour Party, has done a huge amount to further gender equality in Parliament. The first time that we had over 10% of parliamentarians as women was as late as 1997. So that is decades after the first woman took her seat, 1997. And they were called Blair's babes. I mean, how patronising. Do you remember the photos? But it was amazing, the number of women that were elected in 1997. It did feel like a sea change. I remember sitting at home looking at that photo, feeling really excited that this might be something that I would consider in the future. I was just going to university. But we need those role models. Now, both the Conservative Party and the Labour Party are doing better than they have been. Even in the 9 years that I have been an MP, sitting on the green benches where I sit, because I look at the Conservatives more than I look at my colleagues, because I'm sat opposite them, the Conservative Parliamentary Party looks more representative than it did 9 years ago. So all of the parties in their own ways, we had all women shortlists, we made greater strides more quickly, but in their own ways, the different parties are making progress. But we're not there yet. We've had 2 women prime ministers, we have had a woman foreign secretary, we've had women Home Secretaries, but we've never had a woman Chancellor. And the Conservative MP, Nicky Morgan, who I greatly admire, I remember her saying to me when she took up her post as chair of the Treasury Select Committee that she was almost shocked by the level of interest because it was the first time a woman had held that position. I hope that when my children are in their 20s and older, this will be normalised. It won't be something that we necessarily have to talk about or think about because it will be much more equal. I was at an event earlier with Andy Street, and he was giving an answer to a question about trying to make sure local government was more representative. And I said to him, how many of the local authority leaders that you work with in the West Midlands Combined Authority are women? And he said none. And he said it is, you know, when they have those photos of the 7 local authority leaders in our area and the mayor, it is a row of 8 men. So we need to do better in government, in parliament, and in local government. I wanted to say a word or two about women in business, and I have an anecdote to share with you. Only 7 of the FTSE 100 chief executives are women. And there are more FTSE chief executives called Steve or Dave than there are women. What a terrible fact. Small businesses are doing better. Around 20% of small and medium-sized businesses in the UK are led by women, but still not good enough. 15 of the UK's 350 largest companies still have all male boards, no women, women-free zones. We know from some of the research that has been done, if you have a more balanced board in your company, you have better productivity and you often make more money. So it just simply doesn't make sense to waste half the talents of your workforce. I think that International Women's Day is a day for celebration. I was reflecting on some of the progress as well, so I don't want to be entirely negative. My grandma, who unfortunately we lost 5 years ago, when she was a midwife after the war, when she got married, they wanted her to leave her job. When she had her first child, they wanted her to leave her job. And when she dared to have a second child, they definitely wanted her to leave her job. But my grandfather, perhaps a little ahead of his time, stood up for my grandma, and together they said to the local health authority, she's not giving up her job, she's really good at being a midwife, and she held on. Thankfully, midwives, when they dare to get married or have children, they're no longer asked to retire from their jobs, and nor are teachers. So to think that in my grandma's lifetime, that was something that was still happening. I met a group of women today at the Black Country Chambers, and they're a little bit older than me, not that much older, and most of them, there are about 8 or 9 of us in the room, 7 out of 9 of us in the room could remember a time at work when, this wasn't me by the way, I haven't had to experience or endure this, when a male colleague had told them that they shouldn't wear trousers at work. In the 80s and 90s, and a little bit more recent than that too. So we still have a very long way to go. And I'll just part with this really. We made a huge reform in our Parliament in January, which I am very excited about, which is that when I was last on maternity leave, when I dared to have my first baby, 4 days before the Prime Minister decided she really actually did want an election, but she probably shouldn't have bothered, but I wish she hadn't, because I had a newborn baby. But this time, unlike last time, I will get a proxy vote. So I will be able to nominate a colleague who can vote on my behalf. It's an irony, in a way, that we discussed whether we should go forward with this reform one Monday night at 10:30 p.m. And I remember getting to bed and getting home after midnight that night. But I was so euphoric about it that I didn't mind that we had to debate it quite so late in the evening. But can you imagine talking about maternity, paternity, and shared parental leave at that time of an evening. It was, anyway, it was a delicious irony. But I feel so much more comfortable about going off on maternity leave, knowing that I can represent my constituents, and knowing that I will not receive abuse from newspapers for being a lazy MP, like I did last time, who didn't bother to check that I was on maternity leave. Not the local paper, by the way, they have been brilliant, but another paper, thankfully the edition that they printed in Scotland rather than England, so I'm not sure any of my constituents will have read it, but still, women still face those challenges and still face that discrimination, and we have got such a long way to go, but I think we owe an enormous debt of gratitude to all those women who have gone before us. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Our next speaker is Sandra Samuels. Sandra is a city councillor, a cabinet member for adult social care, a director of a small business, a former chair of governors, a former workplace rep, and retired senior theatre sister at NHS. Educated at Collingswood Primary, Northcote High School, Coventry University, Wolverhampton University, and Birmingham OU. A retired senior operating theatre sister in neurosurgery, Sandra has spent 40 years championing equalities in health and promoting the integration between health and social care. She has been a Labour Party member for 2 decades, first elected to the City of Wolverhampton Council in June 2004 in Park Ward, and stood as Labour's prospective parliamentary candidate in 2005 in North Shropshire. First ethnic minority female to represent the West Midlands on the National Policy Forum, delivering 3 winning manifestos for Labour. Nominated by the LGA as the Ambassador for Health and Wellbeing West Midlands region. Honoured with an OBE from the Queen for services to politics and local government. Sandra is passionate about making a difference to the people's lives. We need our communities to erase the abrasive edge of society. Please welcome Sandra Samuels.
That's a very strange photograph. I keep looking at it and thinking, is that really me? Good evening, everyone. And may I say, as well as my colleagues, Happy International Women's Day. Now, I have 40 years in the National Health Service, but I've also spent 20 years in local government. So for me, as there are quite a lot of individuals in the room from local government, what I'd like to talk to you about today is the National Health Service and the changes that I myself, as assisted to make, but also the changes I've seen over the last 40 years. I still want to take my hat off, if I had one on, to Emmeline Pankhurst. Women, us women, have come a long way. Women have made huge contributions to society. We've made huge contribution, not just to local government, for me, but also to the National Health Service. Mary Seacole was someone that I look up to, the first black nurse. Mary Seacole attended the Crimean War. Now, as someone coming up and training in the National Health Service, we weren't taught about Mary Seacole. We were taught about Florence Nightingale. Now, Florence Nightingale, as a nurse, has made huge contributions to health and healthcare. And it would be remiss of me if I didn't mention Mary Seacole, and that's because I am an ethnic minority, as you can see. And we do feel in the National Health Service that we have a lot to celebrate, but we also have a long way to go. I trained as a nurse back in the 70s, and I qualified alongside my colleagues. And the reason why I want to talk to you about my story is because it's a very unusual one. I qualify alongside my colleagues, but I found that even though I did so well and improved myself as an individual, it took me quite a long time to get a manager's post in the National Health Service. And as we are talking about International Women's Day, we have to talk about achievements, but we've also got to talk about those things that we didn't achieve. I was always told in healthcare that there was a glass ceiling. I looked, but I couldn't see it. I couldn't see it. And the reason why I couldn't see the glass ceiling was because I feel as an individual that if it's possible for everyone else, it's possible for me. It took me 4 years and 4 attempts to get a senior manager's post in the National Health Service. But we know that as females, we're told if we work hard, keep our heads down, things will happen for us. But as an ethnic minority, that isn't always the case. So I want to talk about what I, myself, has achieved. Now, I was one of the first ethnic minority senior sisters at the Queen Elizabeth in Birmingham. I managed an operating theatre, and the operating theatre actually carried out surgery on the brain. Now, as individuals, as ethnic minority females, I can't even remember the amount of time someone has walked into my theatre and said to me, "Could I speak to the manager, please?" Now, I have to mention that because these things, even though this is 2019, it still happens. But things like that spurs you on as an individual, doesn't it? So when they ask me for the manager, I always stand there and say, "She's standing in front of you." I stood for Parliament back in 2005, and I believe that even in government, I was invited to Parliament to have photographs taken with the man himself. I believe I was referred to as a Blair Babes. I was invited to Parliament to take photographs with Tony Blair. And I walked up the corridor. And I have to say to you, I love sharing these stories. I have to say to you that when I asked for directions to the common room that I was going to be taking the photograph in, even though I had one of those lanyards around my neck, I believe I was asked if I was there as the admin. Now, it's unbelievable, really, but as individual ethnic minority, and I look around the room and see all my sisters in the room, things like this should not put us off. What it should do, in fact, is spur us on. I've been a manager for 25 years in the National Health Service. I've implemented initiatives which has pushed the boundaries of healthcare. So on retiring 3 years ago, I've dedicated myself to making those changes, and making those changes in adult social care. The reason why, for me, I got involved in politics was to try and make a difference. You don't have to be a politician in order to try and make a difference in society. I've spent 7 years as a cabinet member, and what I'd like to say to you, all of you out there, we succeed in spite of. Now, I always say to myself, if I can do it, then anyone out there can. We're nothing special because we're local politicians. I want to encourage people to get involved. I am, as they mentioned earlier on, a successful businesswoman, and yes, I'm a local councillor, and I'm a former NHS manager. I will continue to fight the good fight, and as a female, as a woman, I feel that there is nothing, and I mean nothing, that we can't achieve. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sandra. Our next speaker is Balnain Tina. She's a crisis clinician at NHS Trust in Birmingham, a General Secretary of Indian Overseas Congress Women Welfare and Media, also a producer and a presenter at Sikh Channel. Balnain will share her thoughts from a Sikh perspective and how women are taking part in politics across the world. Please welcome Balnain Tina.
Good afternoon, everyone. A very happy International Women's Day to all of you. Before I delve into the issue of the day, I want to take a minute to thank all the participants. It means a lot to be here today amongst all of you. Up until few years, I thought that female empowerment was an issue that concerned women in the third world countries, those without a right to basic education, living in societies where they cannot step outside the house, without a male chaperone, or communities where men are simply valued more due to observed reasons. It took the discerning figures of the current female representation in our political community, plus cases from the #MeToo movement come to the forefront for me to realize that this is a problem that still very much exists. My very presence here on this day delivering this talk is testament to the fact that female empowerment, for the lack of it's an issue that plagues us even in 2019 today. We are granted conditional freedom as we seek to reconcile the tension between understanding the realities of the world, whilst ensuring that we do not accept the status quo as the inevitable. As I was researching for my talk here, I came across a very interesting yet infuriating trend in relation to professional women. This trend conveyed that the majority of times when a woman in a professional setting rightfully demands equal pay or equal say, she is more than often threateningly shown the door out. This is because the mentality surrounding our gender is that we are replaceable. If not you, then the other women behind you. As citizens of the first world, we talk our right to world-class education and a seat on the workforce table for granted 62 million women around the world who are just as smart, as hardworking as you and me are not afforded the same privilege. Malala Yousafzai was shot in the head by terrorists just because she stood for her women's education. 200 Nigerian girls were kidnapped from their school dormitories by terrorist groups for their dare to learn. Everyday girls are assaulted on their way to and from school, forced to marry and bear children when they are barely even teenagers. These women exist in a state of well-defined boundaries, marginalized to an extent where advancing beyond their current status is unfathomable reverie. all because grown men are determined to keep women ignorant. Sorry, I'm not here to target on men, but this is the harsh reality of the world. As a woman, this flares me with the outrage, and I take it very personally because somewhere or the other, these attributes exploit themselves and become the future of our gender. They became represented in societal views and values and take from in our laws and policies. What I ask from you today is not just donate to causes that work towards education, accessibility for the girls. I ask you that you be selfish when taking your chances. I ask that you take every opportunity that comes your way and grow. I ask that you work so hard on yourself that you become irreplaceable, so no one can dare to show you the door. It is when we shatter these glass ceilings and take our chances that we will be in a position to enable change for these girls imprisoned by the time-worn views of their communities. As saddening as it is female gender that brazenly drags themselves and their peers down. We do not need the men to do anything because before they can poke holes in our character, we do it for them through mindless but often cruel criticism of our peers and ourselves. What starts off just a little self-doubt, I don't deserve it, or I'm not going to ask for it because I don't want to upset other people, soon turns into venom that feeds prejudice and stereotypes against all women. You cannot blame the men here if you are telling me that you do not deserve it and do not think that you cannot do it. Then, and as an employer, those reputation and finances are at stake. I will give the job to someone who gives me the confidence that they can get it done. The people who scream, I can do it, often tend to be the men who can go into hard and ask for the world and its brother. There needs to be an understanding that this world that we live in unfortunately thrives on prejudice and stereotypes, and these then follow us from the confines of an intimate discussion between two people to corporate boardrooms and other professional spaces. When a woman given a seat at a table to satisfy the gender equality lobbyist, but she's overlooked because they think that she probably does not have an opinion, the knowledge or the confidence to participate. This conditioning is the reason why men in positions of power, such as the leader of the most developing countries in the world, Donald Trump, can publicly reduce the status of his opposition, Hillary Clinton, a graduate of Yale Law School, senator of New York, and initiator of numerous international healthcare and other policy initiatives, to nothing but an enabler of her husband's infidelity. But if she could not satisfy her husband, then how would she satisfy America? Despite remarks like this, 73% of American women voted for him to become their president yet. As the women of today, we need to develop our prospective societies into avenues where there is no room of such harsh critique of self-doubt of oneself and others. Once it becomes common knowledge that this kind and talk is not entertained, then there will be no more of it. It's the simple law of economics. When there's no demand, there will be no supply. We do not need to become stronger. We are strong enough, but it is about changing the way the world perceives the strength. Thus protect your backpack, fiercely empower yourself and all the women around you. Ultimately, Women's Day does not just serve the reminders to promote women's rights, but also demands women's dignity. We will not be overlooked, underestimated, and half listened to because we are full and equal beings. Cheers to you and me. Let's be our own superheroes because everybody else is too busy saving themselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bulnan. Our next speaker is Pat McFadden, MP for Wolverhampton South East. Pat was born in Scotland and grew up in Glasgow as the youngest of 7 children. His parents came to Scotland from Ireland in the 1950s. His father worked as a labourer and his mother in a local authority children's home. Pat was educated at Holyrood Secondary School in the south side of Glasgow and studied politics at Edinburgh University. In 2005, he was elected as MP for Wolverhampton South East. pledging in his maiden speech to fight for education and opportunity for all, regardless of their background. In 2006, he joined the Labour government as Parliamentary Under-Secretary at the Cabinet Office. In 2007, he was appointed Minister of State at the Department for Business, Enterprise and Regulatory Reform, and remained as Minister of State in its successor department, the Department of Business, Innovation and Skills. Pat currently sits on the Select Committee for exiting the European Union. Its role is to examine the work of the department and hold the government to account in this area. Please welcome Mr. Pat McFadden.
Thank you very much. I'm really pleased to be with you all today to celebrate International Women's Day. And the Swedish Social Democrats used to have a slogan, I don't know if they still use it, which was proud but not satisfied. And I think that's not a bad way to sum up where we are. International Women's Day has grown in significance and its international appeal. And how do we take stock on a day like today? Well, the optimistic part of this would be if I compare the life chances of young women today to what they were some decades ago, they are undoubtedly greater. And in most countries, more women will have more power and choice over their own destiny and over their own lives. If you look at career opportunities, the choices are vastly greater than they were before. I think I'm right in saying that most young doctors who qualify in the country today are women, and the same is true of many other professions. So many, many doors have been opened. In politics, women's representation is vastly greater than it was some decades ago. You can see it here on the council, you can see it in Parliament, you can see it in many other places. So there's a lot to be optimistic about. But when we say proud but not satisfied, we also have to look at both sides of the equation. And it would be wrong to say that despite all the progress and all the different choice and all the rights that have been hard won, that the struggle for full equality is complete. That's obviously not the case. And there is still barriers to be faced and still inequality there. We've got good equal pay legislation, but it's not always enforced, and there's still, in some fields, a gender pay gap. I talked about representation in politics. It's much better than it's been before. It's still not equal. It's much better than it's been before. But when I look at the culture of abuse that there is in politics, very often it's women who receive the worst abuse online, women who are the targets of the most vociferous misogyny. And, you know, some of my colleagues have to be really strong, and there have been some shameful episodes. I think of my former colleague Luciana Berger, more or less hounded out of the Labour Party through terrible anti-Semitism and sexism. This young mum, what a terrible, shameful thing to have happened. So the struggle is very, very far from over, and some of my women MP colleagues have to be stronger than the men to deal with this, because they're getting it worse in this. Unfortunately, social media has many, many positives, but it has also become a platform for people to level that kind of abuse. So the struggle is far from over. Things are far from equal. And my message today would really be, let's not forget the good side of the equation that I began with, all the steps forward in equality between men and women that there have been. I'm the very lucky dad of a son and a daughter. And I'm very clear that I want exactly the same life chances for my daughter as I do for my son. And I can say to her with some optimism that that can happen. But it shows you how early attitudes can get to children. We were going around Parliament about a year or two ago. My kids, as you can imagine, have been around Parliament a couple of times. And I was telling her who the Prime Minister was. And the Prime Minister was Theresa May, and she said to me, she said, I didn't even know a woman could be Prime Minister. Now, she was about 5 or 6 years old at the time. Now, I don't know where she got that. She certainly didn't get it from her parents, but she got that from somewhere. And I said, of course a woman can be Prime Minister. And when young kids, as young as 5 or 6, have already absorbed that there's some barrier, that there's some jobs that somehow, for some reason, might not be open to them, then we've got a big, big challenge on. So International Women's Day is really, really important. And my message to you would be, remember that slogan. Be proud of what's achieved, because a great deal has been, and it would be wrong to say it hadn't. But don't be satisfied, because the struggle for real equality is not yet over. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McFadden. Our next speaker is Nina Julka. Nina Julka is an experienced Ofsted inspector, consultant, trainer, writer, and an ex-senior manager of one of the largest further education colleges in the country. She got her first degree from Birmingham University after having 2 kids as a mature student. She has worked relentlessly to encourage women into education and self-reliance. Nina developed access courses in college in the 90s when equal opportunities were not fashionable. As a result, women got a second chance to access education and progress in life. She also brought about institutional change to the National Association of Speakers Clubs by pushing for mixed clubs. Prior to Nina becoming a member, ASC had separate men's and women's speaker clubs. She was the first Asian woman president of Wolverhampton ASC in 1991. She is also the founder trustee of Success and Joy S&G Charitable Trust, with a number of education and health-related projects in India and UK. As well as being a mother and a grandmother, she is also an Isha volunteer, coordinating UK and Europe continuing professional development programs for Isha Foundation inner engineering courses. She enjoys playing golf, taking part in quizzes, cycling, and yoga. Please welcome Nina Julka.
That's the applause. Thanks. Namaskaram, Sat Sri Akal, Assalamu Alaikum, and good evening. I'm thrilled to have an opportunity to speak to so many successful and joyous people on International Women's Day. Success and joy are very close to my heart, since this is also the name of the charity S&J Charitable Trust that I run, to empower women. A number of women from this charity are also in the audience. Thank you. More about that later. My brief today is to speak about the position of women from the Hindu faith perspective. To do that, I intend to take you from the Puranic times to historical and modern times and chart how far we have come, or not, as the case may be, with regards to gender equality and the status of women in modern society. Hinduism bestows a very high status to women. The Rig Veda, a scripture of Hinduism, declares the feminine energy as the essence of the universe, the one who creates all matter and consciousness, the eternal and infinite, the metaphysical and empirical reality, the soul of everything. The woman is celebrated as the most powerful and empowering force in Hindu Upanishads, Shastras, and Purans. Indeed, the three most powerful goddesses in Hinduism are Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth, Saraswati, the goddess of knowledge and education, and Durga, the goddess of power and strength. The three together are known as Bhairavi, the goddess of compassion. However, in later texts, such as Manusmriti, the position of women is mixed and contradictory. Manusmriti text says, as a girl, the woman or a girl should obey and seek protection of her father, as a young woman of her husband, and as a widow of her son. However, in other sections of the same text, it asserts that women must be honored and adorned, and where women are revered, there the gods rejoice. But where they are not, no sacred rite bears any fruit. So scholars have questioned the authenticity and corruption of texts over time, given the numerous inconsistent versions of the Smriti manuscript that have been discovered. This indeed is the key point for me. To look at position of women through the prism of religion and religious texts is inappropriate, as the authenticity of such texts cannot be verified. Religious texts can distort the truth and can be used as a crutch to suit the situation of the time. To clearly understand the position of women in society over the years, we need to untangle religion, culture, class, and socio-economic status of communities. Moving on from ancient to recent historical times, I would just like to mention 5 incredible Hindu women from Indian history. The first incredible woman for me has to be my mother, Satya Rani, who did so much with so little. Her motto was simple living and high thinking. The second, warrior queen Rani Lakshmibai of Jhansi. She fought the rebellion against the British Army in 1852. Some of you may have seen the recent Bollywood film Manikarnika, in which she has been immortalized. She rides this horse and is sword fighting in the actual battle. Number 3, another Hindu woman, Vijayalakshmi Pandit, the first Indian woman president of the United Nations General Assembly. Captain Prem Mathur, the first woman pilot in India. And 5th, close to my heart again, Savitribai Phule. She started India's first school for girls. Now, story has it that she was married at the age of 9, and when she moved to Pune, she took with her a book that was given to her by a Christian missionary. After learning to read and write from her husband, she trained as a teacher and opened the first school for girls in India in 1848. Who says missionaries and husbands don't do good work? And speaking of husbands, I would like to thank my husband sitting in the audience for all his support in whatever I have achieved and what I am doing. So though Hinduism bestows high status to women, and we've seen examples of inspirational women in the history, the plight of a large majority of women still remains pitiful. Most importantly, women don't always get the opportunity to fulfill their potential. Irrespective of faith, they are indoctrinated to be homemakers and sacrifice their own identity so that family can flourish and progress. And the biggest barrier is lack of education and opportunities to develop their skills and talents. I have spent a large chunk of my life to ensure women get a second chance in their life to study and progress. As a lecturer, senior manager in colleges, we did this through developing access courses as an alternative route to academic study and with digital revolution through e-learning. So, Councillor Lynn Moran, we have been implementing your agenda since 80s and 90s. Having done all that, when I used to teach, women still used to come to me and say that it is not me that you have to be working with, but my husband or partner you should be addressing as well, because he needs to change his attitude. A woman going out to study, work, or develop a career inevitably puts pressure on relationships and domestic life. If this is not handled deftly, it only adds to the barriers for women to progress. So family support is crucial for women to succeed. We are lucky in this country to have the infrastructure which allows and facilitates women to study and develop a career. In India, the biggest barrier to education that women face is finance, as education is expensive and not everyone can afford to go to college. To this end, my charity, the SNJ Charitable Trust, comes in. We support and sponsor women's education so that each girl, woman, gets an opportunity to study and fulfill her potential. We have a fundraising event on 6th of April. Many in the audience are coming. If you haven't, there are people selling the tickets. So please support us and help improve at least one woman's life. Finally, no matter which faith you come from, women need to have faith in their own abilities. The question is, what can we do as a society to ensure that women, not just in UK, but throughout the world, have a chance to progress and contribute to the well-being of the society? So let each one of us think of at least one way we're going to facilitate progression of women in each and every field. This one small step by each one of us can have a huge impact to improve gender balance in every field, be it politics, medicine, or law. As the social media campaign says, strong women, strong nation, strong world. Let's make it happen.
Thank you, Nina. Our next speaker is Dave Wilkes. Dave is the writer of more than 800 creative bespoke poems from Just Divine Poem Services. His first thoughts when preparing a unique, personalized, inspirational poem is to uplift, inspire, and motivate the recipient who reads or hears his blessed work. Dave will share his views from a Christian perspective, and he will also read a poem on women empowerment. Please welcome Dave Wilkes.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for having me today. And I've wrote 800 uplifting and inspiring poems from my spirit And I'd like to share some pieces with you today. Would that be okay? Yes. Thank you. Ladies, a dream will never come true if you don't start with a dream idea. A dream will never come true if you're not prepared to take your life up an extra gear. Stretch. Go on, stretch a little more. The type of stretch like you're tiptoeing on your bedroom floor. At least once a day, imagine yourself living your dream and taking your positive self-belief somewhere amazing where it's never been. Thank you. I've just got 799 to go. No. So I'd just like to read one from my book, and it's called Direction. So this was what was on my spirit when I was thinking of direction. Ladies, this personalized poem somewhere must get a mention simply because I've named it Direction. In life, people don't plan to fail. They only fail to plan. And all you can do is the best that you can. Stay focused. Continue to try. And when you wake up in the morning, lift your head up high. On your journey, if it doesn't feel right, then keep left. And follow roads where successful people have stepped. Go forward in your precious life. You see, going backwards is the option, and I'm not going to tell you twice. Feed your mind with healthy food at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And in your personal world, tell yourself there's only one winner. Thank you. So, just before I share with you the International Women's Day poem that I created about 1 p.m. today. That's how I've been blessed. I just get it right here, and then I just type away. Print, frame, bam, next. But out of the 800 dreams I remember and comfort zone, and I'm going to share comfort zone with you right now. To understand whether you're at work or at home, ladies, as of today, please come out of your comfort zone. Because the same old makes your life become thinner and thinner. Coming out of your comfort zone turns you into a champion and a winner. Be with the elite. You won't be alone when you commit yourself. Coming out of your comfort zone. Coming out of your comfort zone, yes. There's going to be a little bit of pain. But the end result's going to feel lovely, like when Tarzan rescued Jane. You see, I've done it. Each day not doing the norm. I wish I'd have done it from the first day I was born. You see, coming out of your comfort zone, now you're not wrapped up in cotton wool. It releases this powerful energy for you now to live your life. Thank you very much. comfort zone. I'd like to bless you with that. And direction, I'd like to bless you with that. And dreams, to my very good friend, I'd like to bless you with that. So, International Women's Day, this is what I've created for you earlier today. And this was just straight from my spirit. International Women's Day. This personalized poem comes from deep within my heart. And to wish you all a happy International Women's Day is where I'd like to start. Individually, you're like princesses and queens. You're so unique. Many of you, the world hasn't even seen. I ask the world, expose the beauty found in every female individual, because not allowing them to really shine with their gifts, to me, it's just diabolical. There's more women becoming greater and greater. Look at the astronomical life of Mother Teresa. Around the world, there's many things that have been fixed by many ladies who have been recognized in world